So this is the best budget motherboard you can get for the AM4 platform. This is from MSI and is the B550-A PRO. So let's take a look at what this motherboard is all about and what's in the box. Okay, so here we have the box. And we have the motherboard here. So I'm just gonna take the board out for the moment. Let's put it on the side for a second. So we have IO shield. Just a plain IO shield, nothing fancy here. All right. We have two SATA 6 gigabit per second connections. One is a right angle one and the other one is a regular one, straight one. We have a couple of extra NVMe screws. I don't know if you guys can see that very well there. So these are very handy. If you ever lose your NVMe screws, you have extra ones here. So that's pretty good. We have a thank you card and register your product. We have a little badge here. So if you're really into case badges or stickers, this is a pretty sweet one. It's a really big red dragon. That's pretty cool. And I was actually surprised to see this. It's been a while since I've seen disc or a DVD-ROM for the drivers. This is quite interesting. I don't know if anyone will ever use a CD-ROM. Some people might not even know what this is. So I guess it's cool. All right. And we have a quick installation guide. So for experienced users, you might not need this if you already know how to build a computer. But for someone that is starting and just creating their first build or just installing their first motherboard, this is a really good addition to the box. So now that we're done with the box, let's just take a look at the board. Okay, so we have the board here, and this board is just plain black with a matte finish. So that's pretty sweet. You can combine it with any color combination that you want to do for your build. So it's fairly flexible for that. And let's start from the top of the board. So here, the first thing that we notice is our 4 DIMM slots. This is DDR4 3200 megahertz, and it's also dual channel. Now coming here to the left, we have our power delivery system. This has 10 phases of digital power with the doubler. That's just for the CPU. And then we have 2 phases for the SoC power, and we have 1 phase for the APU. The APU is just a CPU with an integrated graphics, if that's the type of CPU that you're using for this board. So this motherboard can support 128 gigs of RAM. So that's pretty good if you're doing workstation for video editing or like content creation. The more RAM you have, the better it is for you. And if you're using this board for gaming, then you can also get pretty fast memory. If you want to overclock with an XMP profile, this board can support up to DDR4 4400 megahertz. So that's also pretty sweet. Okay, so now for our power connection and our headers. So here at the very top, we have our 8-pin power connector for our CPU. Here to the right, we have our fan headers. So these are this one is the CPU fan header, and this one is the pump combo fan header. So if you're running water cooling, I suggest you connect your pump here and your fans to this one. Then you have some LED strips headers here. We have another 2 fan headers. These are 4-pin PWM. And coming down here, we have our classic 24-pin ATX power connector. Pretty basic. And here we have our first USB front panel header connector. This is for USB-C for your front panel. So that's pretty sweet. It's a lot of bandwidth for front panel I/O. And then coming down here, we have our SATA connection. So we have 6 SATA ports here. These are 2, 4, 6. And as you can notice here, it has a little cutout here for your cable. So that's a really nice detail. It's a lot easier to connect your cables if you have a little bit of space here. So I really like that about this board. Now, coming down here, we have another fan header. That's also PWM 4-pin. We have more LED strip headers. And now we have our front panel connection here for your power, reset, and LEDs for your case. And here we have our USB 3.2 Gen 1. This is 5 gigabit. This is for your front panel too. So it's really nice to have really fast front panel connections here. And we have our classic USB 2.0 headers for your front panel too. If your case still supports USB 2.0, we have another fan header. And then we have our other fan connector here. We have more LED strip connectors here. And last but not least, we have our front panel audio here. Okay, so that's pretty good for the tour of all your headers. Now, let's go here at the middle of the board. So Here we have our PCI Express expansion slots. So this board has a combination of PCI Express 4 and 3. Here, the first M.2 slot is a PCI Express 4 connection. So it supports NVMe Gen 4 and NVMe Gen 3. It has a heatsink also. If you're using Gen 4, I suggest you really use the heatsink. And this one is connected directly to the CPU. Then coming down here, we have our 16X PCI Express slot. This one is also Gen 4. And this one also connects directly to the CPU. If you're running a GPU on this board, I suggest you use this PCI Express connection here. So coming down here, we have our PCI Express 3.0 expansion slots. We have an X1 here. We have another X1 here. And even though this one looks like an X16, this one is actually an X4. You can see that the pins only go all the way here. Now coming down here, we have our second M.2 expansion slot. This one is PCI Express Gen 3 and it's an X4. Now all of our PCI Express 3.0 expansion slots actually go through the chipset and not through the CPU. So that's an overview of the board and all the connections that it has. Now we're going to go and check out the I/O. So I'm going to move the board here so that you guys can see the I/O. So let's look at what we have here for I/O. We have our BIOS flash button here. And then we have USB 2.0. So we have 2 here and 2 here. And if you notice this one, I will be curious to know if you know what this is. Well, this is mouse and keyboard combo connection. This is a very old school connector that maybe some of you guys don't know about it. But back in the day, the USB and the keyboard were actually not USB. They had their own port. It's interesting to see that here in a new board. Coming here to the right, we have our display port and our HDMI connections. These are only if you're using an APU, so a CPU with integrated graphics, USB 2.0. And then here we have our first pair of USB 3.2. These ones are 3.2 Gen 1, so these are 5 gigabit connections. So these are type A connections. You have really fast USB 3, so that's really nice. And we have our Realtek 1 gigabit connection Ethernet there. Now coming here to the right, we have our really fast USB. So this is USB 3.2 Gen 2, and this is 10 gigabit connection. So you have a type A and a type C. So really fast USB. I like seeing this. And last but not least, we have a Realtek 7.1 audio interface here. That's it for I/O. If we come down here, talking about audio, you can see here the board has a little separation, like a little cutout of the board. I'm happy to see this in more budget-oriented motherboards like this one because it really improves the signal for the audio. Basically, what this does is it separates the PCB connections from the audio components. So all of this is the audio components up to here. And it creates a separation from the entire board. So any interference or any static electricity that might be going on here on your board will be separated from your audio signal. So that's really nice to see on a very budget-friendly board like this one. So the reason why I say this is one of the best budget motherboards for the AM4 platform is because it's only 150 Canadian dollars. That's the price that I paid for this board. With this board, you can pretty much run a pretty high-end workstation, whether it's for video editing or gaming. Yes, this motherboard has its limitations, and one of the limitations is that it's not very good at overclocking. This motherboard is for someone that will run their CPU at stock and not overclock it past their turbo boost natural overclocking. If you're a more advanced user and you really like to tinker with your power settings and your clock settings and your timings on your memory and all that stuff, this board is not going to be great for that. What this board excels at is simplicity, and just the fact that it's a really good board with high quality components that will get the job done. So why did I choose this specific motherboard? Well, I was looking for a budget friendly oriented motherboard that would do the basics really well, and this is the board that I found out. And I found out that this is one of the best ones. What I'm building here is I'm building a new editing machine for my girlfriend, and I already had some parts laying around, and the only thing that I was missing was a motherboard. I really didn't want it to spend too much money on it, so I just looked for what's the best budget motherboard that I could find, and this is the one that I came up with. I am pairing this motherboard with a couple of components. So first, the CPU. The one that I had laying around is a Ryzen 5 3600X. It's a middle range CPU that will get the job done for now. So it's a pretty good CPU. Now for the memory, I have two DIMMs of Trident Z Neo. These are 3600 megahertz DIMMs, and these are just 8 gigs of RAM each. So for a total of 16 gigs. This will get the job done for now. There's also a lot of space for upgrades. So we'll go for this. And now I have a special component that will go into this PC, and I would like you to guess what it is. Yes, it's the GPU, but this is not any regular GPU. At first glance, it looks like a RTX reference NVIDIA card. Like that's what the chassis looks like. But if you actually look closely, it says GeForce GTX. I'll give you guys a challenge, and I'll let you guys guess what this GPU is. And let me know in the comments. We'll see who is right. It's a pretty good GPU. That's pretty much all the components that are gonna go into this build. I have a spare SSD and NVMe that's gonna go here. I don't have it at hand right now, but it's just a Samsung Evo. And the power supply, I have a 1000 watt EVGA power supply that is going to be more than enough for this build. Also, I would like to mention that this motherboard supports a 3950X or a 5950X, which are like pretty beefy CPUs. Of course, don't try to overclock these CPUs. They are already pretty power hungry as they are, but this motherboard fully supports them with its 10-phase power delivery system. That's why I said you can run a pretty big rig on this motherboard, and as long as you stay in stock speeds and as long as you stay with the good quality components like the RAM and all the other components, this motherboard will serve you really well. So who is this motherboard for? This motherboard is for anyone that is looking to build a budget gaming machine or a budget editing machine. It does the basics really well with high quality components. And of course, this channel is all about Linux. So of course, we're going to install Linux on this board. I'm curious to see what are the IOMMU groups and the VFIO support that we can get out of this board. If you pair this board with a 5950X and 128 gigs of RAM, this could be a really good entry-level server for any enthusiast that is trying to learn Linux. I mean, entry-level, we're talking about 16 cores, 32 threads, and 128 gigs of RAM, but for the server world, this is actually considered low-end. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see me build out this video editing machine. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to give it a thumbs up if you like it, and also share it with your friends. And if you have any questions or any comments, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see you on the next one.